we're back for another episode of the Powerhouse Podcast. I'm Clayton Collins, your host for Powerhouse and the CEO of HousingWire. Today's conversation is an exclusive one. We get a behind-the-scenes look by interviewing Bonnie Wilhelm, the CEO of the Andromeda Group and COO of Perseus inside of Constellation Software. And in case you haven't been paying attention, Constellation in 2023 acquired two of the most important technology assets in the housing industry. Optimal Blue, the largest PP&E in the industry, and Dark Matter Technologies, which is the rebrand of the former Black Knight and Power business, and Empower is the second largest LOS. So under Bonnie's leadership, we have this software portfolio and housing that controls and touches an incredibly large part of the ecosystem. I'm guessing most of our listeners do business with this part of Constellation in one way or another. Bonnie gives us a glimpse into the investing and operating strategy at Constellation, which is incredibly differentiated. They believe in perpetual holding businesses into perpetuity, which enables a very unique investing and operating strategy. They also believe in decentralized operations, and this decentralized strategy extends far past day-to-day operations. It actually goes into investing in future acquisitions and add-ons and tuck-ins inside of the business. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Bonnie Wilhelm, the CEO of the Andromeda Group at Constellation Software. Bonnie, very nice to meet you. Thank you so much for joining me for an episode of Powerhouse.
So nice to meet you, Clayton. Thanks for having me.
So Bonnie, as I told you in pre-show, I've long admired Constellation and the strategy and business that Mark Leonard and the team have built. I'm so excited to hear more about you and your story today, and then jump into the mortgage and real estate strategy at Constellation. But let's start off with hearing a little more about your background and what professional path led you to the role you play today as CEO of the Andromeda Group at Constellation.
Sure. Yeah, it's been a really exciting road, and so happy to be a part of Constellation. Actually, my background started in accounting. I was working for Arthur Andersen, and then later to my audit client, Sinclair Broadcast Group. And back in 2000, Sinclair wanted to make an investment in the software market. It was new, booming at the time. They wanted to make their place in it. So we made an investment in a software business that was building a tool for production home builders. So Sinclair asked me to go ahead and lead that team from a finance and operations perspective, which I did. And later in 2009, Constellation ended up going ahead and buying that business. So in my 24 years in software, it all started with housing. So it's super exciting to be leading Andromeda today with such a large footprint in real estate and mortgage.
That's crazy. And so, like, if I hear that story correctly, you've never actually had to go out and sharpen up a resume. You jumped from Arthur Andersen to a client, and that client led to the path that you're on now.
That's right. In fact, I was a junior in college, and we had our internship planning. And so I got the internship with Arthur Andersen and then got hired off of that. So I've never had to have an interview.
That's fascinating. What was so at Sinclair, media powerhouse, what was the business thesis around investing in this software company in the housing accounting space?
Yeah, it was actually a CRM that was sold to production home builders.
Okay.
And Ryland Homes was currently situated in the Baltimore area. And they, as I remember it, they hired a new CEO, and the CEO wanted to move the whole management team to California. And the team of executives that left there, they didn't want to move their families, saw a need in working for Ryland to build a CRM for production home builders like Ryland. So David Smith, the president of Sinclair, was listening to a seminar done by the president of the company that was then called Net Fanatics, later G1440, and they just really got excited and saw everything that was happening in the tech space, and had worked in M&A a lot with their television acquisition strategy, and thought they would shift to this.
Did that strategy continue in investing in kind of, I guess, the early stages of vertical software for Sinclair?
They made a few investments, and then their board and their shareholders decided that it was better for them to stick to their core, and that's a lesson a lot of us learn.
Absolutely. Okay, so that path, that acquisition by Sinclair led you to Constellation. I've long admired Constellation. I was really excited last year. I listened to like this long business breakdowns episode on the Constellation strategy, and there's so many like concepts and operating philosophies that I just found like true to how I think about business. So long admired the business and loved getting a deeper dive in that podcast, and I'm excited to go deeper in this podcast with you. But tell us about Constellation. What is the business philosophy that drives this phenomenal returns for over 30 years?
Yeah, I mean, the philosophy is pretty simple. It's buy and hold forever. We don't sell any of the businesses that we acquire. And the reason for that is Mark Leonard, early in his career, realized that what's right for the customers and what's right for the business long term can't just be strategized on a quarterly basis. So the philosophy is to buy, really invest in the businesses, understand what the customer's needs are, nail down a management team that stays with the businesses, and then figure out what other needs those customers are trying to solve, and to continue to acquire in those vertical markets and adjacencies. And then so we bring on new management teams. The management teams then use their industry knowledge, buy new businesses in adjacents, and so on and so forth. So that's been the strategy that's worked for 30 years.
That's pretty unique that the management teams start to drive and close acquisitions on behalf of the business. That's like extreme decentralization.
It is, and it's through Mark Leonard's philosophy that autonomy drives the best business decisions, and the management teams that we acquire really are the ones who know the businesses the best and their customers the best. So I think that that's why it works.
Yeah. So, okay. So zooming like kind of up to the Constellation level, and we're going to go deep in mortgage in a minute, but what are the verticals that Constellation has built out? Like, what are the industry concentrations that are part of the business today?
Constellation is in over 125 different verticals. In our group, with home building is a huge vertical, real estate, mortgage, but outside of that, you see club management, that might be fitness centers or golf club management. You just about name any vertical, we're in it.
And with that like extreme decentralization on operating and investing, are there any shared resources that sit at the top, or does everything flow into like the sector or business unit group?
I think if you're talking about the top, the shared resources really are the talent talent and the experience that layer of management at head office has. So really, I think the biggest tools are best practice sharing and also introductions. So I'll give you an example. In these two large acquisitions that we did in 2023, our management teams had unique challenges that I wasn't familiar with how to fix. But Mark himself was able to connect me to other industries, say in the Netherlands, that had similar experiences and could help solve those problems. So really, it's those best practice tools.
So like Mark and other folks at the corporate level, like understand the challenges that different operating units have had, and then like connect operators across. Is there like do you guys come together annually for an event, or is it just like, hey, when the need arises, the introduction is there?
We do. It used to be that we had one Constellation summit every year, and all of the leadership would come. But at this point, with over 45,000 employees, that's too difficult. So each of the operating groups have their own academies. But once a year, we do come together for our M&A Academy. That's usually at the end of the year, hosted in the Toronto area. And that's where anybody who's responsible for capital deployment comes together for a couple of days and shares learnings from past years' acquisitions. Here's what we did really well, but most importantly, we highlight what challenges we had, because we really just don't want to repeat mistakes if we can avoid them. So that's, to me, that part of our culture is really unique. There's no pride in saying, hey, we saw this and we made this mistake, and here's what you should do next time to not do the same thing I did.
So one of the other things that I thought was fascinating, and what I've at least heard about Constellation, is how cash flow from existing businesses fuels the acquisition strategy and fuels growth, where there's a lot of people running acquisition strategies that with different financing sources. So can you give us a glimpse into the the financing source strategy at Constellation?
Yeah. So historically, as you mentioned, we use our cash flow to deploy on new acquisitions. So each capital deployment manager has a capital deployment target, and that's usually in line with their ANI, the cash flow that they throw off from our operations. So it's my job to deploy 100% of the cash flow that Andromeda throws off. And that's historically been the way it works. Now, as we've deployed capital on larger acquisitions, we've learned that in order to achieve our board set hurdle rate, using leverage has allowed us to pay more. And so when we're in competition with private equity and other strategic investors, that has been important for us. So we have done a bit of debt financing in addition to complete equity.
Okay, so with redeploying capital, so inside of Perseus, like if club management is making a big play, does capital flow between industry groups, or or are you able to does your ANI stay inside of like the housing sector strategy?
Our ANI is within our operating group. So
Okay.
But that's not to say that, it all rolls up to Constellation.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, I think this is probably an appropriate time to talk about the structure of the operating group. So like when you closed the big acquisitions last year of Black Knights and Power and the Optimal Blue businesses, I think there was the announcement was a Perseus Group acquisition, and now we've heard more about Andromeda. So like give us a view into actually like give me the flow. How do we flow from Constellation to the operating businesses in terms of structure?
Yeah, no, it can get confusing, and we really try to simplify it as much as possible. But so Constellation has the 6 operating groups, and I can go through them. Harris, Valaris, Jonas, Perseus, TSS, and Vela. So those are the 6 operating groups. And each operating group has its own structure, which is equally as confusing as Perseus. But Perseus has a portfolio of 7 different types of businesses. So in 2023, that Perseus was split into 2 divisions, the Andromeda division that I run, and then the Zodiac division. So businesses in the real estate, financial services, and mortgage space, amongst a few others, stayed on the Andromeda side.
And so how much of that, so inside of the business group, like how much emphasis is put on integration versus a collection of like related businesses?
Can you rephrase the question?
Yeah. I'll frame that a little bit differently. So within the mortgage group, I know there's been multiple acquisitions even prior to Optimal Blue and Empower, like Reverse Vision and Mortgage Builder. Is there operational integration or management team integration, or do you focus on how do you think of integration versus like a family of related businesses that don't have like product or sales team integration?
So we keep our portfolios under, in that case, a mortgage portfolio, but we let each of the businesses under there run autonomously. And they come together routinely in conferences or management team get-togethers to share their best practices, their industry learnings, and figure out whether the customer can benefit from any sharing or consolidation. If we're to acquire a small business in one of those spaces, we tuck it under an existing business, and we don't have a management team to keep in that example.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So like situational, small tuck-ins can roll inside of an existing business in the portfolio, but others are going to operate related but separate. So tell us more, like you came from coming from the finance background and now running like operations for this business. What is your like kind of path looked like in terms of the executive responsibilities that you take on and like how you integrate with the businesses that you've acquired inside of your operating group?
I work closely with the businesses in the operating group. Now, just to take a step back, I'm in a dual role. I oversee the shared functions of the Perseus group. So building up the infrastructure of Perseus, HR, finance, legal, et cetera, really helped me to understand the backbone. And then that naturally moved me into this role of being responsible for running the businesses. So in that, making sure that the business leaders, the portfolio managers have everything that they need to support the ongoing growth of their businesses, making sure that they're running profitably or that the investments that they're making organically make sense. And additionally, and a huge responsibility of mine is finding new acquisitions within the space to complement our existing businesses, or investing in organic initiatives.
Yeah. So what is on hunting for new acquisitions? Like, what is the criteria you set right now? Like, where do you spend time?
Right now, we're really excited about the mortgage space. The acquisitions of Optimal Blue and Empower have really put our name on the map. As you know from your history with Constellation, most people don't know about us. So it really allowed us to have, vendors who may be interested in being acquired, want to know more about it. So we're spending a lot of our time talking to other competitors, and adjacencies, and we talk to the management teams within those two businesses and ask them, is there a bolt-on that would work for you? And that's we're really just spending a lot of our time doing that now, modeling out what that would look like. So we hope to be able to announce some of those transactions here shortly.
How do you think about like the backdrop of the mortgage industry? I mean, we're investing organically and doing deals as well, and it's been a tough 2 years in housing, and the market's behaved differently without any type of like default or like servicing boost in the last 2 years. We've had like origination volume down and tighter margins, kind of pressure all around the ecosystem. How do you think about like this pressurized environment that we're operating in and how that impacts investing strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, for our buy and hold forever strategy, it works. Volumes are down. That impacts our valuations. But we think that people need to come into homes. People need to close these mortgages. So I think that the higher mortgage rate will start to become a reality to people, and we'll see higher volumes.
Yeah, I think that's the long-term mindset is something that is relatively unique in housing. I think there's a lot of operators and investors who've operated like cycle to cycle, and there's not many folks who've been able to pick their head up and look at a multi-decade horizon that makes investing theses brings a little more calmness and confidence to an investment thesis when you're not thinking about a 5 to 7 year cycle.
We have experience in this, and that's what makes Constellation unique. Coming from the home building software space, we had a significant decline soon after I joined. And actually, what it forced us to do was figure out how to make sure to take a close look at our operations, make changes to the software for the long term, make changes to the business itself. And I don't think that a lot of our competition has had that experience with, half a decade long cycles.
What are some of the other important learnings about operating in cyclical businesses that you've learned firsthand or learned from other business unit leaders inside of the Constellation family?
I think being patient is at the top of that list. Just really, knowing that having confidence that things will turn, and that making very small decisions carefully is better than switching gears and, just thinking that this is a permanent state.
Yeah, from like a technical perspective and like modeling out forecasts and for existing businesses or acquisitions, like do you put weight in the forecast of like economists in the industry, or do you have a different approach to taking a view on what origination volume might look like in 25 or 28?
I think we've learned that no one really knows what's going to happen. What we did do is we looked at what our modeling was for home builder, and we look at how long it took to really turn that around, and we found that it was over 2 times what the prediction said. So that's the data that we really choose to look at and say, this could happen, and if it does, then we build our models based on 4 scenarios, and that was from most optimistic to least, and we're prepared to operate within any one of those scenarios.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Have you, in some of those scenarios, are being nimble enough to invest when the market does turn on? I think we've seen that the mortgage market has a tendency to move quickly. Refi can come out of nowhere. And do your operation strategy account for the fact that like, hey, we might need additional headcount or additional dev work or I guess it's a little bit different in software, but prepare to put the foot on the gas when the market like says it's the appropriate time.
Yes, we absolutely prepare for that kind of scenario. We try to prepare for anything, and because we do have so many resources across our different portfolios, we can be in a position to pull them in if need be as well.
So, okay, so jumping in back to the 2023 acquisitions of Optimal Blue and the Black Knight and Power platform, can you give us a glimpse into what was special about these deals, what was attractive from the role that these two products played in the industry and how it impacts your overall strategy?
I mean, for us to be able to have the number 2 LOS in Empower and the number 1 PPE in Optimal Blue at the size of these two businesses is really, a special for us as a Constellation business. We have a lot of competition in the vertical market software space. We compete with private equity, who usually is in a position to have a much higher valuation than us. So for us to be able to take both of these transactions to the finish line, to welcome these amazing management teams with thousands of employees worth of mortgage experience was just super special for us. So we're investing in those teams and trying to figure out what they need and just supporting them and letting them know that we understand that the situation in the economy is difficult, but that we've been there before.
Yeah, that's got to be really reassuring, and like having an investor that's been there before versus kind of the knee jerk, that's happened a lot of times in this industry.
For sure.
All right, so acquiring the number 2 LOS, number 1 PPE. What is that? Okay, so you said you lean on the management teams on future acquisitions, but are there other logical paths, other logical like capabilities that like help round out the Perseus or Andromeda suite?
Yeah, I think, us as a management team and pulling in each of the leaders from all of our businesses in mortgage and our related industries, we say, okay, what is missing? What is out there that, we could either build or buy that helps round this out? There's some obvious, servicing, for example, is something that's missing. We talk about things like that. So that's what, we discuss all the time. What is the best fit here?
And you mentioned build. Is like organic and build a big part of the strategy, or is it usually flexing that acquisition muscle?
It's both. I mean, you can see in our timeline that we acquired Mortgage Builder, but then we went ahead and replatformed it using those resources and launched Nova. That was all an organic initiative. So when it makes sense to do that, we'll build. We've been rewriting our home builder software. That made more sense for us to do that than to buy. There was nothing else out there to buy. So I think, we think through it and are rational about the decisions. And sometimes we'll look at something and say, okay, well, we could, build something similar. So let's take that strategy. And sometimes it's time to market. The customer need is now, and it's going to take 2 years to build. Then buy is the more rational decision.
And that comes back to that capital allocator like strategy and mindset that you talked about up front, and knowing when the right time to flex the appropriate tool in your toolkit.
Yeah, it's refreshing to have a company, Constellation, that invests so rationally and the fundamentals are clear. It just makes it easier for us as capital deployers to think through these decisions.
Yeah. So describing yourself as a capital deployer, like how do you want like the mortgage industry to perceive Constellation? How do you want to be seen in the industry, and how do you think you're understood or misunderstood?
We want to be seen as a top player. We want to be seen as being there for customers. We want to understand what the customer needs are, and we want to innovate. We want to invest, and we want to make sure that they know that we're going to be here for the long haul. That's what we want. That's what we feel like we've got the management team who has the industry experience and the experience with customer relationships to go ahead and execute on that. There are rumors in the marketplace, for sure. We've heard them. Rumors that we are not going to invest, rumors that we're just going to let these assets sit out there and not pay attention to them. That couldn't be further from the truth. I think that if you talk to some of the customers that we've been meeting with and proving what our mission is through innovation and some of the more recent hires that we've made, I think the customers are seeing that we're proving what we've been saying for the past 9 months.
Yeah. I mean, you just announced a big one with Joe Tyrell, correct?
Yeah. Couldn't be more happy to have him on the team.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, congrats on recruiting Joe to the organization. You talked about some of the customer interactions you've had. Have you had any like extremely enlightening or surprising conversations with customers that changed a viewpoint or helped refine a viewpoint on strategically?
Every different customer interaction I have has been extremely helpful. I've been working with the dark matter team along with one of my teammates at Constellation, and we've been going to each of the customers' head offices and listening to what their needs are, listening to where they want to go with the product. And now that they're sort of in this lull, and this is what happened to us in Home Builder too, there's more time for these executives to reflect on what they're missing and what they need. And it really comes down to reducing the time to originate alone. And that's exactly what our software and our current innovations are positioned to take them. So that's really exciting. So hearing that over and over again, hearing from the customers what they're hearing from some of our competition has been enlightening because it's unfortunately just that they're receiving false information. So it's been really great for us to have those direct conversations and let them know that we're here to stay.
I think so. The you think some of the rumors are starting from like competitive rumor mill.
Sure.
I think one of the most amazing and respectable things about Constellation is its ability to hold in perpetuity and leverage cash flow to grow businesses. I'm sure someone could, flip that narrative and say, hey, they're out there just like mining the cash flow and not plowing it back in. And so like how that there's nuance in that narrative, right? And so if someone misunderstands the strategy, they can probably make it sound negative pretty quickly. And I think you have a different approach to that.
Right. I mean, the reality is that we've got a 30-year track record of buying and holding and not selling. We wouldn't be able to buy and hold forever if we weren't investing in our software because our customers would leave. We want our customers to stay, and therefore we need to continue to invest. And that's one of the best practices that we share with all of our businesses that come on board with us.
So, Bonnie, it's hard to have a conversation in mortgage right now and not have AI come up. That's actually hard to have a conversation about anything and not have AI come up. We're at HousingWire. We're prepping for our HousingWire AI Summit that's coming up on July 23rd. We are thrilled that you and Dark Matter and Optimal Blue are participating in the event. Can you give us a glimpse into how you are thinking about AI for your businesses?
Sure. As I mentioned earlier, our customers' number one need in loan origination is reducing the time that it takes for a loan to get from start to finish. And that's where a significant portion of our AI investment is going. So we're able to get, I don't want to name names, but one of our customers is down to, 20 days. And that's a significant reduction in time for him using AI. And we're super excited to be invited to Dallas to speak.
Yeah, so that's phenomenal. I'm sure we're going to learn a lot on stage. And it's interesting how you talk about how you have one customer that's like down to 20 days. On this show and a lot of other HousingWire content, we've talked about the technology innovation cycle in mortgage and how, if we rewind a decade ago, we saw a major investment and a lot of companies emerge. It was more than a decade, 15 years ago, emerge focused more on the front end of the transaction with loan origination software and then point of sale software. And then COVID expedited this wave at the finish line of trying to innovate around title and valuation and closing. And like now that we're in a low volume period with margin compression, everyone focuses on the middle. And is that where you think AI has an opportunity to really make an impact on this proverbial world where mortgages can actually be more efficient and scale without adding egregious amounts of headcount to the P&L?
We do. I mean, that is exactly where DMT, Dark Matter's AVA product, is situated at focusing on just that. And the team is convinced that the early results are showing that that's absolutely what's going to happen. That's where we are.
That's awesome. By the way, Dark Matter, awesome brand. I love when you guys announced that. I was like, that's a fabulous branding idea.
Yeah, the team did a great job. We were super happy with that.
Well, Bonnie, thank you so much for giving us a glimpse into the overall Constellation strategy, as well as what you're building inside of Perseus and Andromeda. Really interesting for me as an operator investor, and for all of our HousingWire audience members who are in some way likely doing business with you after these most recent acquisitions.